The storm had rolled in fast over the plains, turning the sky the color of gunmetal. The air crackled with dry heat, and the scent of rain clung to the dust. Jake Callahan, a rancher with hands rough as rawhide and eyes the color of old whiskey, had just finished mending the fence near the creek when he heard it, a sharp cry cutting through the wind. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was human. Dropping his tools, he sprinted toward the sound, boots sinking in the wet dirt as the first drops of rain began to fall. He found her there, a young woman, no more than 20, lying in the tall grass beside her overturned wagon. Her ankle was twisted badly, and she was clutching at her leg, her face pale as linen. "It's swelling fast," Jake muttered, kneeling beside her. The woman tried to move, but a flash of pain shot through her. "Don't touch me," she hissed through gritted teeth, though her voice trembled more with fear than anger. Jake tipped his head back, scanning the horizon. The wagon's wheel was shattered, the horse long gone. Whoever she was, she'd been out here alone far too long. "You won't last a night if that leg keeps swelling," he said. "Let me help." She hesitated, breathing hard. Her clothes were travel-worn, her hair tangled from the wind. Finally, she gave a reluctant nod. Jake lifted her gently, careful not to jar the injured limb, and carried her back toward his ranch. The old house stood like a sentinel against the storm, its porch light flickering in the growing dusk. Inside, he set her down near the fire, the flickering glow painting her face in golden shadow. She was beautiful, not the polished kind of beauty you'd find in a city girl, but wild and unrefined, like the land itself. Her name, she said, was Clara May. She'd been heading west to join her husband, a miner who'd ridden to her from Nevada. But somewhere along the way, the trail had gone wrong, the storm had hit, and she'd lost everything. "You're lucky I found you," Jake said quietly as he fetched a bowl of cool water. "That creek floods when it rains like this. You'd have been swept off before dawn." She tried to smile, but the pain in her leg twisted it into a grimace. Jake tore a strip of cloth from an old linen sack and dipped it in the water. "Now," he murmured, "we need to keep the swelling down." She watched him with wide eyes as he pressed the damp cloth gently around her ankle. Her skin was hot to the touch, and the swelling was growing fast, angry and red beneath the firelight. "It's worse than I thought," Jake said, pulling off his gloves. "If it keeps up, you'll lose the foot." Clara flinched. "No," she whispered, "please." He paused, then took a slow breath. "There's something I can try. But you'll have to trust me." The words hung heavy in the air. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Clara nodded faintly, biting her lip. Jake reached for his knife, not to harm, but to cut away the fabric around her wound. "Hold still," he said softly. The blade slid through the torn hem of her dress, revealing her leg beneath, swollen, discolored, the veins pulsing visibly under her skin. Clara gasped. "Dear Lord," Jake's jaw tightened. "You must have been bitten," he said, eyes narrowing. "Snake, most likely. The poison's moving quick." Her breath hitched. "I didn't even see it," she said weakly. Jake didn't answer. He'd seen it before, too many times. A rattler's bite out here could kill within hours. Without another word, he reached for his flask and poured whiskey over the wound, the liquid hissing as it met her skin. She cried out, clutching the arm of the chair. "It's gotta be done," he said firmly. "Hold on, Clara." Then, with the storm raging outside and lightning flashing through the window, he did the unthinkable. Jake bent low, pressed his lips to the bite, and drew the poison out. Clara froze, every nerve in her body alive with shock and pain. He spat the venom into the fire, where it crackled and hissed like oil on flame. Again, he drew, spat, and drew again, his hands steady, his breath harsh and ragged. The air between them was thick, part terror, part something else neither of them dared name. When he finally pulled back, sweat streaking his brow, the swelling had begun to slow. The color in her leg was changing, still bruised, but no longer spreading. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You saved me," she whispered. Jake didn't look at her. "Not yet," he said, his voice rough. "You'll need rest. That poison can come back if you move too soon." He rose, poured the last of the whiskey into a tin cup, and handed it to her. "Drink. It'll help." She obeyed, her hands trembling as she lifted the cup. Outside, thunder rolled like cannon fire across the plains. The night deepened, and the ranch creaked under the weight of the storm. As Jake sat by the fire, watching her drift toward sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the air, something beyond the storm, beyond the danger. He didn't know who Clara really was, or what shadows she might be running from. But in that dim firelight, with her breathing soft and steady, he knew one thing for certain. The moment he pulled up her dress and faced death itself to save her, their fates had become tangled like roots under the same earth. And by morning, when the storm broke, the Wild West would remember their names forever. Morning came slow and golden across the plains, washing the storm's ruin in soft light. The fields glittered with dew, the fences stood broken in places, and the creek had spilled far beyond its banks. Inside the cabin, the fire had died down to a few glowing embers. Jake sat slumped in his chair, his hat tipped forward, half asleep but alert enough to hear the faint stirring from the cot behind him. Clara May blinked awake, her eyes tracing the rough-hewn ceiling before landing on him. He was there, as steady as the land itself, the smell of smoke and leather clinging to him. Her legs still ached, but the swelling had eased. The venom's rage had been stopped by that midnight act, the thing no man would have dared, but Jake had done without hesitation. "You're alive," he said quietly without turning. "That's a good start." She tried to sit up but winced at the sharp pain. "You shouldn't have done what you did," she said softly. "You could have been poisoned too." Jake finally looked at her, his eyes hard but kind. "Didn't much care," he replied. "I wasn't about to let you die on my land." The way he said it made her heart twist. His land, lonely, vast, unending. He lived alone, she realized, the kind of man who carried silence like armor. "How long have you been out here?" she asked. "Too long," he said. "Long enough to forget why I came in the first place." Clara's gaze lingered on the scar across his jaw, the sunburned skin, the lines around his eyes. He looked like a man carved from the same dust he worked in. Outside, the wind swept through the prairie grass, whispering against the wooden walls. "I owe you my life," she said finally. Jake shook his head. "You don't owe me a damn thing. Just heal up and move on when you can." But his tone betrayed something else, a flicker of unease, maybe even fear. Because deep down, he knew what saving her might cost him. The West didn't forgive debts easily, not the kind sealed in blood and venom. As the day stretched on, Jake busied himself around the ranch, feeding the horses, repairing the gate, pretending not to think about the woman inside his home. But every time the wind shifted, he could smell the faint trace of lavender from her hair. It was strange how quickly a stranger could haunt a place. By sundown, he found himself back by her side, checking her bandages, avoiding her eyes. "It looks better," he murmured. "But you'll still need a few days before you can ride." She nodded, then hesitated. "Jake, what did you mean when you said you'd forgotten why you came here?" He didn't answer right away. He poured himself a cup of coffee instead, the liquid dark as midnight. "I bought this land after my wife died," he said finally. "Was supposed to be a fresh start. Turns out, there's no such thing. The ghosts just follow you, quieter maybe, but they don't die." Clara's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. The pain in his voice was real, raw, like a wound that never closed. "I'm sorry," she said after a long silence. "Don't be," he replied. "Storms take what they want. Always have." Night came again, cool, clear, and full of crickets. Jake sat on the porch, staring at the stars, when he heard her voice behind him. "Can I join you?" He turned, surprised to see her standing, leaning on the doorframe for balance. "You shouldn't be walkin'," he said. "I'll live," she replied, smiling faintly. She limped to the rocking chair beside him and sat down, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. For a while, neither spoke. The stars stretched endless above them, and the smell of wet grass carried from the fields. Then, softly, Clara said, "You did something no one's ever done for me before." Jake frowned. "Save your life." "No," she said, "risk yours for it." Her voice was calm, but her eyes shimmered in the moonlight. "Most men I've known only take. You gave." Jake looked away, jaw tightening. "Don't make me out to be some hero," he muttered. "I ain't that kind of man." Clara tilted her head. "Maybe not, but you're a good one." That silence between them changed after that, not heavy, not awkward. Just alive, like something old had woken between them. Then, far out across the plain, a flicker of movement caught Jake's eye. A distant rider, dark against the horizon. His body tensed. "You expecting company?" he asked sharply. Clara froze, her fingers gripping the blanket tight. "No," she whispered, but her face told another story. The rider was coming fast, raising a trail of dust. Jake stood, his hand moving to the rifle propped against the wall. Who is it, Clara? He demanded, her eyes filled with tears. My husband, she said. He wasn't supposed to find me. Jake's blood ran cold. You told me he was in Nevada. He was, she said. But he's not the man you think. He's dangerous, Jake. He always has been. She tried to rise, but pain flared in her leg. If he sees me here, he'll kill you. Jake chambered around with a calmness that belied the storm brewing inside him. Then I guess I'll have to make sure he don't. Outside, the thunder of hooves grew louder. The peace that had lingered between them was gone, replaced by the raw, electric edge of the Wild West, a land where love and death were always only a heartbeat apart.